Morning, folks. Afternoon to some of you. Probably many of you.
Daniel, nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Ved. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
You look really happy.
Yeah, I am.
Put a big smile on my face. I don't see a lot of happy faces around here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're trying to bring some more joy to this work. I know it's heavy and hard and dense and tough, but can still have fun and have some joy while doing this stuff too, and get serious stuff done as well. So it's a both and.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. While we wait for people to roll in, there is a really cool event happening today. I'll drop it in the chat. Mellon is hosting an event, Imagining Freedom, and there will be some really cool, a nice lineup of guest speakers, Angela Davis, Gina Dent, and their president will also be speaking. So I'm going to drop a link to that here in the chat. And the hopes are that everybody here can attend, but also that we are able to get the recording from that and people here can share it with your students and the population of people who are currently incarcerated as well. And for people who are here, we hope that these calls that will be put on YouTube, these recordings can also be made available to your student population that is currently incarcerated as well. So, and on that same thread, any webinars that are streamed that we host, we would love to see students have more access to these as well. So let us know what we need to do to make that happen. We can provide recordings, links, whatever way that can happen, let us know. So. And then before I hand it off to Aaron and Stephanie, I'm going to plug one more thing, maybe two more things. Our prison education book project launched. So if there's any program directors or people doing HEP programs here or that you know of that might need books for their classrooms, new books, brand new, latest edition books, that application is live on our website. Feel free to apply for as many books as you need, and we'll ship them out, I think, by the end of April. So that's one plug, really cool initiative and partnership that we have with Norton. The other one is that we're hiring a communications director. So that is also on our website if you know anybody who might be interested. So I'll pause and I'll pass it off to Aaron and Stephanie.
Thanks, Ved. Stephanie, I'm going to let you do introductions. I do just want to highlight here, Daniel, are you currently incarcerated right now and joining us?
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and super glad that you are here. And I just want to elevate with, I think, to my knowledge, you're the first that we've been able to have participate in the webinar series. So welcome, and would love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Well, I appreciate that welcome. Thank you.
For sure. Stephanie, do you have any words of wisdom I think this is our last official webinar together on these series, so.
Yeah, I'll just, I'm not sure what the first slide in the presentation is, but just to give a little context for this last one, a lot of this, even the first two webinars are sort of framed around the public comments that people gave in response to the Department of Education's notice of proposed rulemaking regarding Pell for incarcerated students. And even though those public comments have now been responded to by the Department of Education in the final regulations, I think there's still a lot of wisdom from the field that can be gleaned from those public comments in moving forward with a lot of these a lot of these issues that we're talking about, because a lot of it is still actually pretty open as to what all of this is going to look like. So drawing on those public comments, I think, is going to be helpful. And I'll just put in the chat also that we have some briefs that we're going to be sharing around this, but also just to say around public comments, Charlotte West, when the public comments all first came out, put together a really helpful piece on those comments that I think is still a good reference. So I'll put that in, and then the drafts of our briefs as well. So Erin, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Can someone grant me the power to share screen? I don't know how I'm supposed to share cute pictures of my kids unless I can share my screen with you all. Okay, looks like I have the power. How does this look, everybody? Okay, this is my sweet baby Elia, one of them. Okay, so just a shout out again to Stephanie, who is a huge person on this project and who is currently getting her PhD. So we will not have her with us today, but just want to acknowledge her tons of labor in this project. So big shout out to Ascendium as well for helping to sponsor the webinar series. I sure hope that this is the first of many. I've really enjoyed these conversations and the community and the questions, and I'm hopeful that other folks can kind of pick this up and we can continue to meet, particularly ahead of fall of 23. So as I've said the last couple of weeks, I won't spend a ton of time here, but the kind of what we're talking about, or kind of the bigger, broader context of all of this, is a study that we wrapped up last year. We're going to focus today instead on kind of a new collection of analyses, but I do just want to plug that the briefs are free. We'll include the links, so if folks do want to read them or share them, please do so. So to kind of set the ground for what we're talking about today, we've got a bit of a timeline here. December of 2020, we know that the legislation established possible metrics that an oversight entity, and the language is important here, may use to determine whether a prison education program is operating in their language the best interest of students. We then know, because a number of our colleagues were involved, October through December 2021, we had the negotiated rulemaking, and this is where representatives of kind of currently formally incarcerated folks, directly impacted folks, corrections, higher ed administrators, financial aid, consumer advocacy groups were consulted. July 26, 2022, so just last summer, Department of Ed released the negotiated rulemaking, and then that's when they changed the May language to must. And then later that year, last year, this was the public comment period. We'll talk a little bit today about what commenters criticized and why. And then finally, in October of last year, in the final regulations, the Department of Education made all output metrics optional and all input metrics required. And so hoping to kind of get into the nitty gritty on that today, and also talk with folks about what your PEP application processes currently look like, what you can share with us, what's going well, what isn't, and kind of drawing on the knowledge and resources in this community. So right now, we have 4 required best interest metrics. This is experience, credentials, and turnover rates of instructors, transferability of credits earned in a PEP, incarcerated students' access to academic and career advising, and students' ability to transfer to any campus in the same modality. We have lots of optional best interest metrics. And I'm going to highlight these because they came from public comments, but please don't read this as our endorsement of these. This is really kind of other suggestions, but percentage of students continuing their education upon release, post-release job placement rates, student earning post-release, recidivism rates among students who participate in prison education, and then incarcerated students' rates of degree completion, and other indicators pertinent to success is determined by the oversight entity. So want to just talk a little bit about why Ed made output metrics optional. This was really in response to public comments, and I don't know if I can't see the chat, but Stephanie, are you going to drop the? We've got an excellent kind of outline of what public commenters said, who they were, kind of what the criticisms of proposed metrics are. And so in response to public commenters, some changes that were made is, the argument that is completely accurate that existing data systems are insufficient to support some of the required data. For many of us working at the state level, we know that corrections data systems tend not to talk to education data systems, and we're having to do a lot of patchwork and kind of rebuilding of data infrastructure, and important work, but that's going to take some time for most of us. Continued education and job placement oftentimes can conflict with earnings. So depending on the pace and rate at which someone is required to get a job might mean that they take a job to this latter point regardless of wages. It also means that if I'm going to continue my education, as we all know, I'm not going to be working as much. And so my wages are going to take a hit because of that. We also know, and we need so much more research in this area. I'd love to support folks who are pursuing this. But the job placement rates and earnings do not account for employment barriers, and I would say bias. We know that that's happening. We have some data to understand, but we've not yet kind of cracked the nut between the kind of extent to which earning a credential can offset some of those or influence some of those biases that folks encounter. So what we did is we kind of went through most of the public comments and tried to kind of see what might be available for us to elevate, essentially. And what really stood out to us were some things around equity. And so one of the things that was really important is measures to ensure the student body reflects incarcerated population at the facility. This came up among many public commenters. Another one was regarding access. And so an example being how clear are folks who might want to access accommodations, whether or not they're currently eligible or not, accommodations in applying to the program, in enrolling in the program, and then pursuing through to completion. And then I want to talk just a minute about high impact practices, and then I'm going to open this up for folks. And I'm going to just apologize that I've got my babies here instead of this next slide. So I'm curious how many of us are kind of familiar with this idea of high impact practices or have heard of these? Hands, hearts, crying faces, whatever works for you this morning. So one of the things that we did not see a lot of in public comments were suggestions for high impact practices. And so we've been kind of trying to read between the lines. I won't spend a ton of time today, but I want to just offer this as an option. And I think Stephanie's going to drop some AAC and U links and resources for folks. But when we think about what's the best interest of students, we have a rich literature base and evidence base on the kinds of experiences that undergraduate students, when they have access to them, increases the benefits for teaching and learning. And this is particularly impactful for underserved student populations. And so kind of thinking about who we recruit, who we serve, thinking about making sure that if we're providing these resources and these experiences, that we are working especially hard to make sure that they are actually accessible. And so I wanted to just list some of the the examples here, we can certainly talk more about this later, but these should all be kinds of things that we've at least heard about: capstone courses and projects, collaborative assignments, common intellectual experiences, diversity and global learning, e-portfolios, first-year seminars and experiences, internships, learning communities, service or community-based learning, and undergraduate research. I understand the extent to which we are able to provide this inside of a prison is very challenging. However, I do just want to remind folks that there's great research here to support your efforts and advocacy of making these things available to your students in whatever form it has to take, right? And so when we think about best interest of student metrics, if you're wanting additional kind of things to think about, I would definitely check out those AAC&U resources, and I'd love to hear as well from folks who are maybe doing some of these things. And I will just say that these kinds of experiences listed here are regardless of modality. So it doesn't matter if you're distance-based, or if you're on a tablet, or if you're synchronous or asynchronous, or broadcast, or in-person, or hybrid, a combination of all of those things. All of these things can still be achieved independent of modality. So I'm just going to pause there and go back to my babies and see if folks want to chime in. I've been talking a bit, so please raise a hand or come off mute or do both. Yeah, Daniel.
I just want to thank you for including the common intellectual experience. I think that's one of the things that's missing in the prison system that I am in the process of going through. You can, do all of your studying through erudition and sit in your cell and learn all of these, learn through books, all of these experiences, but without the communication with other intellectual minds, you're really going to be missing out on your chance to fully meet your potential. And so I'm thankful that you put that in there as a high impact area. That's all.
Yeah, thanks for this. And I know this is something that we all really struggle with, particularly tablet-based learning, or learning management systems where corrections requires that we disengage, peer-to-peer conversation. So, I'd be curious to hear if and how folks are working around that, but providing some supported ways for students to interact with each other is critical, to your point.
How do we approach the prisons to actually consider that? Because it seems like interaction between incarcerated people seems to be really taboo or difficult to secure.
It's a great question. I'd love to turn it to the folks who are here and just hear some wisdom if people have had experiences they can share.
Yeah, especially if there's any DOC people here or any people working in corrections.
Yep.
How you guys doing today? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm currently working in corrections right now, and I must say it's a tug of war with DOC and Department of Education, and it's like 4 educational entities at the prison I work at, and no one speaks to each other. There's like a combative, like air in the environment that we work in. DOC is stopping the education from doing their job. The Department of Correction, who supports the Bible College, is allowing the Bible College to get different, certain, it's just kind of like a, big brother got the best little brother thing. So, and I understand that's something that DOC promotes. It's like a separation thing. When I went through the DOC training, I was trained not to talk or not to trust the inmates. And I'm an educator. I have to trust and build a relationship in order to get through to these students. You get what I'm saying? So it is a fight that we all got to have. So that's why I think in the last call I mentioned that we need to develop a curriculum. One entity like the Alliance need to develop a curriculum where the DOC could be trained, because over 6 years of working in the prisons, I'm realizing that it's not the inmates I'm here saving. I'm really saving the people that's being paid to care and provide custody for these people. You know what I mean? So I think that's one thing that we're being trained from the door, not to trust or not to love or not to care for the people that we're paid to do it for.
Yep. Stephanie, did you want to say anything before we kick it over to Ben? Ben, hi.
Hello. So from a Department of Corrections, what I would say is sometimes common sense is not so common. So I think the hard sell from us. I think one thing that people need to understand before I kind of walk through this is DOCs have a primary mission, and it's the safety and security of its residents, its staff, and the community. And things that are contraindicated to that are very difficult to overcome. And I think that's not necessarily a negative or a bad thing, but it creates these weird dynamics. And so when I said common sense sometimes is not so common, we have a lot of online programs, and we've talked about moderated chat features where you post a person-to-person chat, and before it actually gets posted, it gets moderated by a faculty member. And there's some movement around that we're talking through, and there are possibilities related to that. We don't have authority yet, but the common sense part of that is people are having conversations in face-to-face classes all the time about learning, and that's number one. The number two part of the conversation is learning cannot and should not occur in a vacuum. It is by its very nature a social situation to really apply learning to your situation. So having the dialogue should be a fundamental aspect of the educational piece. And from a security standpoint, the third point that I do make with security staff is I prefer allowing people to have dialogue and conversation in a database that is tracked, that we can watch and observe and go back and look at any dangerous conversations, to the conversations we have no ability to know about or track in a rec yard, for instance. So those are the to me, that's the sort of conversations that can occur with security staff. And we're not there. We haven't arrived, but those are the conversations we've opened. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Tracy, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, and Ben said it really well. I'm with the Oregon Department of Corrections, and I'm the education and training administrator, but it's a constant conversation more with the security staff. I think I've finally gotten our IT staff on board. Now it's changing a culture within our facilities around this piece with our correctional staff. And it really is about having constant conversations, just like Ben said. They can, passing notes. What's the difference between passing notes within the facility that you may not know about, or that offhanded comment as somebody's walking by? At least when it's on video, you're capturing that. And when it's in a text box, you're capturing that, and you're able to go back and see what was actually said. And so just being able to have those conversations to kind of talk about the security part of it. We are moving towards that. Again, we're like Ben, we're not there. We're in the beginning stages of all these conversations, but I think things are changing. And, as we start talking to our IT folks, they live in a bubble, and being able to let them talk to other IT staff throughout the country is, that are doing certain things, opens their eyes to that there are a lot of other things that are out there. So it is changing. And I see a lot of my colleagues that do this on a daily basis raising their hands. So I will pass it off to them. They'll probably say it much better than me. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I also I think want to say part of the reason that we're highlighting this today is like, these are aspirational. this is please use this as a resource. This is an evidence base. And I think oftentimes when we think about, the word delivery often bothers me. Like, who is the delivering the education? And that's actually not how education works. If we look at these kind of high impact practices, it isn't simply just, a one-way dissemination model. There does need to be some interaction, and we all don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can go directly to the evidence base to see what those things should be. Muriel, am I saying that right? Muriel?
It's beautiful. That's not right, but I like it. It's Muriel. And yes, I see a lot of my colleagues and friends that we were together at a conference not too long ago, but Ben and Tracy hit the nail on the head. I go back 6 years, thinking back 6 years ago and where we were. We now have secure computer labs in all of our state facilities. Many of our students have access to Chromebooks in and out of the education building to their dorms, rec areas, different things like that. The struggle that we have is also security, but we've done a better job with getting with our training department and, letting them know this is what we need. These are the things that are going on. I think it's just that they didn't know, and it was that old school mindset. And, just letting them know these guys and ladies, they're students of ours. We want them to come to the education building. We want them to feel like students, as well as those that are on online programs. So, we're trying to work on the chat thing as well. We're kind of looking at something similar to what Ben is talking about, but it's who monitors that. Our staff has already, spread very thin. We're very fortunate. I think it was I guess it was Brian that spoke, that we have our own school system. We're our own school board. So we really don't have to answer to Department of Ed, which they work well with us anyway. But we're very fortunate with that. And our secretary is very mindful of and, into programs and reentry. So we are blessed on so many fronts, but, we've come across the problem of Zoom. A lot of people want to use Zoom. So we're not able to do that just because of enemies, maybe in different dorms where the Zoom is taking place or, different things like that. So again, we're just working through that chat option or being able to interact with each other. It's coming from a public school background, elementary. That was how my children learned. I called them hogs and logs. You had some that, talked about everything that they knew and one that would just sit there. Well, eventually that log is going to get some confidence and start talking. So they need to interact with each other. That's all.
Yeah, and I see there's all sorts of folks who want to chat. I love this. I will just say too that, if this is one element of a high impact practice, right, is peer-to-peer interaction. But we also, think about peer to faculty interaction, right? So it isn't just that I should be able to interact with people and share intellectual experiences as a student, but also with my professors. Danielle.
I will echo what all my many colleagues have said, but I will found that I'm lucky to have very supportive secretaries and legislators in Maryland. But what I found specifically with the IT people is letting them see what other states have done that have been successful and have not had any issues with it. So I go to Muriel in Louisiana or Tracy in Oregon or somewhere and say, hey, I know you're doing this. Show me on paper so I can give it to them and I can show them that it does work and that we do not have to worry about the safety and security. In addition, advocate at the highest levels that you possibly can. Do the advocating. Even if you're just a teacher at a facility, advocate to your principal, have the principal advocate to the warden, have that person advocate to the next person, me at my level, at the legislative level, that sort of thing, to the point where, ad nauseum, they get sick of hearing it from you. And you finally get someone that says, okay, hey, tell me about that. Let me know, what is it that you need? And it seems to have helped me. But I would say advocacy and definitely just reaching out to people and getting what they've gone through so that what those pitfalls were and the successes that you can bring to your people.
Thank you. Yeah, connecting with community. Ved, and then Molly.
I mean, really quick, I think the point that was just brought up is important. The power of modeling and proof of concept is overlooked sometimes. And I think we as a field can do better at making the work of others known, making that visible. So like when DOCs are looking at some of this stuff and considering it, they have places to turn to see where it's been done. And that stuff is extremely powerful. On this thread that kind of Brian brought to the table, and then we all kind of talked about around the culture of, prison and how this, how education is received by staff and administration. I'm continuously trying to think about how we think about the role and position of correctional officers as well, right? And so like I think like it might not be the most popular opinion, but it's true that a lot of times these officers are living in conditions that aren't that great as well. They're spending just as much time, a lot of time behind these walls as well, not getting paid, sometimes not having access to education as well. So, I mean, there are programs out here that offer higher ed to their correctional staff as well. So those sorts of models are really cool. And I think that that's a good way to circumvent some of the tension or resentment for some people being afforded education and not others. And so trying to think about like the overall culture of the prison space, thinking about it holistically and thinking about taking care of, some of these correctional officers who are working in these spaces as well, who aren't making money and who also are living close to the poverty line as well, and also living in towns where some of these prisons, there's one grocery store, one corner store and things. So people are living like that too. So like thinking about that and how that can change, how people who are incarcerated are treated as well by thinking about them as well. So, I mean, this sounds unpopular for people who might not have done time, but for people who have done time, we understand this sort of stuff and how important it is. So it's just food for thought for the field to think about when working in these spaces. So
Thanks, Bed. Molly, with some snow in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so much snow. Way more snow than I want to worry about. Okay, that's not why I raised my hand. I raised my hand because, so I've said this on the first version of this webinar. I've said this on other webinars. I think for me as a person representing the philanthropic community here, who is supporting the field of higher ed in prison, sort of at a macro level. One of the things that I'm really curious to know from folks is what better technical assistance could look like in this space. And so I'm asking that in part because I think we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of time talking about what TA is going to look like on the sort of school side of this equation. We don't spend a ton of time talking about what technical assistance could look like on the corrections side or at the intersection of that partnership. So I don't have an answer to a question about what high impact practices look like, but what I do have is a question back to you all about, because again, like I think I and my colleagues in the philanthropic community are always thinking about how we can better support these efforts, whether it's more conversations like this, whether it's, get everybody together at the national conference in November and like sit down and talk through some of these issues at the micro level. How do we sort of use these different levels of support in the field and to better nurture the strategic partnerships that are absolutely essential in order for this work to work. So again, we don't have to answer this question in real time unless folks have thoughts about it, but I would be curious to know from you all on the call, particularly those in corrections, but anybody, if there were technical assistance coming, what would you want help with? Is it that you need help determining who should be on your stakeholder committee? Is it that you need help developing your application for your PEP programs? Is it that you need help connecting with college partners in your state? Like those are the kinds of questions, again, that it would be, for my purposes anyway, super helpful to know the answers to. So again, we don't have to have that conversation in this moment. I don't want to take up time away from this conversation. Maybe I'll just put my email in the chat too, if anybody wants to follow up, but unless folks have thoughts that need to come out of their mouths right now.
Well, I'm going to pitch that webinar number 4 is that. I would love to join that conversation. I do just want to highlight here, and I can't keep track of the chat. There's so many good things coming and going. Into, you know, reference to Molly's question, it does seem like there could be some usefulness around bringing together corrections and higher ed to achieve some of these high impact practices and what needs to be done, right? Because I think part of what we know when officers are present, physically present in classrooms, we have evidence to demonstrate that that changes the classroom. It absolutely does, right? And so when we're thinking about increased surveillance of chat, for example, to what extent might that or does that influence? And these are just good things to know. They're good things to question, particularly when we think about the educational aims of programming. Dale.
Yeah, thanks so much. I don't want to take up too much time here, but when I think about like one thing that from my perspective is missing from these conversations is sort of diving into what the purpose of college is. Like, what is the purpose of higher education? That's, I mean, I'm thinking about this because I'm a doctoral researcher, right? This is my subject. Okay, so when we talk about high impact practices or best practices, a lot of the times we're constrained by thinking about what the DOCs want, right? And there's a real important constraints because we're doing college in a prison. We have to, you know, they're the official oversight entity. We have to comport to what they want, but it seems like we're getting away from like just thinking about the aims and purposes of higher ed generally, right? So are we trying to foster cognition? Are we preparing citizens? Are we preparing people for economic contributions, right? So on and so forth. And I think even that is right. So if we talk about a shared intellectual experience and we're talking about dialogue and relationships, and there's so much more to that conversation, right? So what of expanding, transforming, and understanding one's own reality, right? That's the type of stuff that I wish we could, right, try to balance that conversation. I don't, right? So to have more conversation about that would be phenomenal, because that's going to condition how we think about dialogue and relationships, right? And intersectionality. Sure. Thank you.
I would think that's webinar number 5, Fed, that Dale gets to moderate. But essentially, because that is what's implicit in all the messages coming through the chat right now, is this, you know, seemingly contradictory nature. And if we go back to the literature, practitioners are writing about this in the 70s, about kind of the seemingly contradictory nature between the aims of higher education and the aims of incarceration. And what we're trying to do at this point is to say, okay, we've got safety, we've got security concerns, very real. We also have deeply intellectual pursuits that oftentimes will require that we ask questions about the very nature of safety and security. And so in what ways are we able to find some common ground to allow students to explore these paths within the confines, right? I'd love for this to be another webinar, for us to get some corrections folks as well, and to just kind of talk through this, because I think if I'm kind of reading the chat correctly, we'd like some resources. We'd like that template. We'd like, you know, here's the 2-pager that we're going to sit down and maybe this is also technical assistance, Molly. And maybe Vera, I don't know, maybe Vera's doing some of this work already in their technical assistance efforts as well. Okay. We can stop staring at my beautiful children. We are going to talk a little bit about PEP applications, and Stephanie did a phenomenal deep dive on some examples. And what I will say is that we are not identifying these applications, mostly because we just didn't have permission. But if folks are on the call where you're like, actually, that looks like our application and you want to talk about it, we invite you to do so. Even afterward, if you're like, hey, I don't care if you let us, you know, if you share who we are, just let us know and we'd be happy to. So right now, this is sample number 1. In most of the samples that we reviewed, there is some kind of introductory language, and it mostly focuses on this best interest metric, the 4 of them that are required. This sample application also acknowledges a 2-year review process to kind of demonstrate those best interests. This document also asks applicants to describe how the program is recruiting faculty with similar credentials as on campus, to describe how academic and career advising for PEP is similar to on-campus services, what students have in terms of options to continue their education post-release. So for example, is a reapplication to the institution necessary? Are there questions about criminal histories on the admissions application? And then what's the plan for programs to communicate with students about this information? I have a second slide, but I want to just highlight 2 things that I've asterisked here. For this first one, program is recruiting faculty with similar credentials as on campus, for folks who are wanting to go an additional layer there, and training, right? Just because I teach philosophy on campus doesn't mean that I'm equipped to teach philosophy in the prison. My credentials on paper might be, so like, what is the process to train me to be an effective educator inside? And then this academic career advising, what we know, at least from the research, I'm thinking Ithaca's work, some of our work, some work that's going to be coming down from the Ready for Pell initiative, is that we need much more information about the cadence at which students are able to access these services. So it isn't simply saying, yes, we offer academic and career advising. It is, how often can a student access these services and what's the process for them to do so? So continued on this application, applicants need to describe the onboarding and admissions processes for their applicants, success metrics and methods of collection. So how are programs going to assess the degree to which they're achieving their goals? Delivery methods, again, for PEP, I might just change that to engagement methods, including technology requirements on behalf of corrections and also the students. And then career opportunities, barriers to licensure, and typical wages of that particular credential path. And I'm going to run through just a couple of these and then we'll open it up and see how folks want to make them better. So sample 2, we had applicants will need to describe the motivation behind mission and purpose of PEP. And this gets to exactly what Dale was just saying earlier, and really what was kind of coming through all of our conversations. Why are we doing this work? And making that explicit on the PEP application. What has been the contact with the accreditor, with your accrediting agency about becoming a prison education program? This application is interesting because it's asking if there are any non-credit required courses that applicants or students must take. And oftentimes this is in the form of college preparatory courses, sometimes referred to as remedial or developmental courses. And they may carry credit, but they might not carry academic credit. Any known barriers to employment for the credential and pathway offered, and oftentimes this is state specific. So if you're in a particular state or even municipality where there's certain licensure restrictions for felony charges or whatever, this is an application that's asking for you to disclose that. An estimated time to degree or time to credential. What are the modes of engagement that you're planning to engage with students? And then how does the program plan to communicate with students about things like admissions, program updates, and vice versa, being very clear the extent to which the program is going to rely on corrections to help facilitate some of that. And then an orientation plan. So this particular application is asking programs to talk about how they're going to educate students about Pell Grants. And if you attended our first webinar, we know that this is critical, that programs help students understand what federal student aid is. In addition to all those things, this description or this application asks for applicants to describe how they will ensure racial equity at admissions and underrepresented applicants in recruitment. And this is one of the only applications that we reviewed that was this explicit. And so this goes back to that, does the kind of student body, or even if we think about the application body, do the demographics of those communities reflect the larger demographics of the facility? And this one is focusing on race. We could certainly focus in addition to age, first generation status, veteran status, disability, citizenship status, certainly sex or gender, depending on the facility that you're at. This application also asks for cost of attendance, and this would include invisible costs of attendance as well. How tuition will be covered for Pell ineligible students. So this goes back to our very first webinar. What's the plan? And just being clear, right? At this point in time, for example, we're not going to admit anyone who's not Pell eligible. Or, you know, we've got a small set of scholarship money set aside that we will use up into a certain point, etc. We will, you know, whatever it is, but just being clear. Student and reentry supports. So, you know, what's happening if and when folks get released? Are they able to matriculate to campus? Barriers to enrolling on said campus. And so what are those? Oftentimes what we found in the research is that students might have to reapply if they're going to be physically on campus. Any articulation agreements that exist, and these are mostly statewide if you're regionally accredited already, so should be able to draw on those. Plans for financial sustainability of the program and definitions of measurement of success for students and the program. What does success mean, and how explicit are we going to make it? So we have one more application that I'll talk through, and then we can go into discussion. So again, this document introduces the best interest criteria. So again, there are 4 required ones. It also lists rates of continuation post-release, job placement rates, and earnings. And so this is an application that's requiring PEPs to list those things. Unique requirements of this particular application is a description of an individualized learning plan, a statement of need. And so this would be a program saying, you know, we are choosing the auto mechanics pathway because, you know, the labor market says X. We think the proposed program is going to have this impact, and here's the population who we're going to target. Essentially, why are we choosing what we're doing and implementing it there? Staffing plan. So what's the roles, responsibilities, and backgrounds of who's going to be running the program, and then bios demonstrating the qualifications of those folks. Description of DOC roles and responsibilities, including technology requirements. I read this as a needs list on behalf of PEPs. What is it that we need from corrections? When, how, at what rate? And similar to the previous application, a sustainability plan and budget narrative. This application also asks, can your current systems record student demographics? How will your prison education program connect to adult basic education, high school equivalency programming within the Department of Corrections? Regarding modality, how do you solicit feedback from students about the quality of coursework they received during the semester? So what is that feedback loop? And for those of us at an accredited college or university, those mechanisms already exist. How can you guarantee the program will be covered by Pell and other funding, and there will be no additional costs to students? So I'm going to pause there and see if folks have comments on anything that we just chatted about.
I think the some of the resources that Molly Lasagna was asking about might be listed in, you know, some of these things that were that are in these slides. For example, you know, how do we craft the kind of agreements and the agreement language? Is there something, you know, templated that we could use throughout for PEP applications? It seems like it would speed up the process if it was standardized and maybe more agreed upon.
For sure. Yeah. Remind me again, Rama, where are you at? Which state?
I'm in Chicago, but I work with WGU Labs. WGU is nationally accredited, so
Yep.
we're everywhere.
Great. Yeah, you're here in Utah too. Thanks. Rachel, are you coming at us live from New York?
I am. Thanks
Hi.
so much. And so, you know, I guess my question here, and, you know, not to be everyone knows I'm like notorious to being like, New York doesn't work this way, but New York doesn't work this way. And we have, right, like we have 30 college programs that have been existing for years. And so our DOC essentially really isn't weighing at the moment, you know, who they're going to continue to let in, right? Like they want to continue most of all, right? Like all of our programs that have been really robust for the past decade, right? So I guess my question is, does anyone expect there to be, like, how much attention is going to be given to what these DOC applications are asking, and how thorough do they need to be? Is there any guidance that's going to be given to these oversight entities? Because essentially, I get our feeling from our DOC is they would like to keep what's in place happening and not really reinvent an entire process because they don't have capacity or expertise really to develop a whole new system, certainly in the next 6 months. So, and move 30 institutions through that fairly quickly. So I guess my question is, you know, the title of this too, will there be further guidance to oversight entities about what's going to cut it, or do we have to wait until we go through the entire application process to see if we get accepted or rejected?
Yeah, and if Margaret's willing, I'd love for Margaret, she just put something in the chat that I think partially addresses that. Margaret from Vera, if you would maybe come off mute and share some wisdom here.
I think what I can say is that we'll have to see what the application looks like in terms of what it's asking of colleges, what information is in there about the oversight entity. It's going to be hard to guess today, like what that's going to look like. But hopefully that'll be released soon. And we had preliminary conversation with the Department of Education about hosting some kind of a webinar once that application goes live, so that people can have a chance to look at it, hear about it, and if you haven't submitted public comment before, you know, we can provide some information on how to do that also.
And
yeah,
is it your understanding that what Ed is going to release, like that would be the template that all of these colleges would then start to use, and so corrections would start to use as well, and anything in addition to that would be just simply that in addition to that? Is that the aim?
So there's 3 steps to the process, right? So the corrections departments are issuing application forms, or the oversight entities are issuing application forms that colleges are filling out. Some of that's already happening. The college is going to the accreditor and having that conversation. And then those are the pieces from that, my understanding, would then inform what they would submit to the Department of Education and the Department of Education's application.
Okay.
Sorry, last piece. I just want to say, I got to say this every time I can, just to everyone with power on the call, you know, just that we're already like really behind in terms of making this happen for fall. And so I understand, like, not that Margaret and Erin, you're not the ones controlling it, but it's very frustrating to feel like there could be potential interruption of services for our students in New York, and or delayed start dates, which again, you know, we'll deal with and we'll get through. But I think that it's just, and I've been saying this to Sean Addy very publicly for over a year now, but it's just, again, in a state where we have so many players working across so many facilities, you know, it's really concerning. And I'm eager to see the guidance for existing second chance Pell campuses, because again, that will be very helpful. I've heard it's coming, but again, we're trying to operate with the fall semester for Pell, and I'm very concerned about our ability to make that happen, because it's not just our ability, right? It's docs and middle states.
Yep.
And Ed.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you for kind of very publicly staying on brand and being that broken record, because I think a number of us, I mean, there are states that, I mean, don't have a application yet, and I'm in one of them. And so I just think we're all kind of all over the map here.
Can I offer something? This is Ruth from Vera. There's one other layer of
Please.
review added in with these applications that is included in the regulations, which is that the accreditors will review and approve the methodology for how the college, the institution, with the oversight entity made the determination that the PEP meets the best interest criteria. So there's a contemplated role for accreditors as well as the final, like the I think the thing that Margaret was mentioning, which was the future application that the colleges will need to fill out in order to get that ed approval at the last step. But so they'll go to the accreditor, they'll go to the oversight entity first. That process will happen. Then they'll go to the accreditor, and the accreditor will review the methodology by which that college was initially approved by the oversight entity. So that's just one, I think, to get to your question, Rachel, of kind of like who's going to be looking at this. I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of raised as well.
I appreciate it. And I think we have a slide on accreditation because we wanted to bring this up. I'd be curious to know, I think it's Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Southern group, Northwest accrediting that I'm aware of doesn't have a guidance kind of FAQ document out yet. Does anybody have an update on whether or the extent to which the other accrediting regional accreditors have disseminated instructions?
I just want to say this because I see somebody referencing it in the chat too. One of the reasons that we highlighted accreditation as a priority for further guidance is that SAC-COC, which is the Southern Regional Accrediting Body, held a public webinar in January, which is something very rare for them, on this very topic, and issued an advisory memo about what their process is going to look like. And then that's going to their board of trustees, I believe in May or June, to be finally approved. And one of the reasons that I wanted to highlight this too is that during that webinar, there was some misunderstanding on the part of SAC-COC as to whether you had to have a program in 2 sites in order to be accredited. And that did get cleared up. I think there was somebody from Department of Ed on the call, maybe some folks from Vera, but it's just an indication that these accrediting bodies probably need some more guidance about the regulations and interpreting them. And so maybe some proactive measures on the part of the Department of Ed would be great here. I'll also just say it's another reason that we wanted to highlight it as a priority is that it may affect and probably will affect the timeline for getting your program to become a prison education program. Because, so for example, SAC-COC is having this meeting in May or June. We have July 1st as this start date. I think some people were maybe counting on that. But then even if you have everything ready by that, board of trustees meeting, it's still, as anybody who's gone through the accreditation process knows, it still takes some time to get all of that done. So all that to say, thank you, Ruth, for highlighting accreditation. I know Vera's doing a lot of work on this as well, but it would definitely help to have some more guidance and technical assistance for accreditors on interpreting and implementing these regulations.
For sure. And I see a couple hands up right before this. So I just want to draw attention to Nick Hillman's work. And if Stephanie, you could drop a link, kind of this initial list of accredited prison sites. So I'm thinking that this might be an additional resource for folks as well. Dale and then Molly.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. I just wanted to say quickly, this seems like, one, maybe I'm not understanding it right, because now I'm wondering how many different applications there are, right? So in Michigan, the MDOC just finalize an application for us to apply. And I guess since they're the oversight entity, I'm wondering if there's a second application with the DOE, the US DOE, or is that one and the same thing? But I guess my bigger point was going to be that, so Michigan, we're forming a consortium right now, and we took this as an opportunity, right? Since legally the MDOC is the oversight entity, we tried to put ourselves like right underneath them as an advisory board, right? And like formalize it. And, we're getting some wonderful help from Vera on this, but it seems like I mean, there's lots of models on how to do that, but to us, it seemed like that was one way to go, right? To like pool our resources and make sure that we are, if the power is going to be given to them, we're going to put ourselves as close to that process as possible. And we just happen to have a DOC who has been at the table the whole time. So I guess that doesn't help anything in terms of people's timelines, right? That's actually more work, but I'm wondering, like, on a national level, what does that look like if people, and what do we think about that? And what about pushing more entities and states to do that? I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, Molly.
Thanks. My comment's actually going to be beyond all the things we've been talking about, but I've been sitting here on it. So here we go. I think, what we've been talking a lot about the why of why we do this work. And I've heard a lot of things like recidivism and workplace development. But I think something we're missing in all of this conversation, and this is not to demonize anybody in any parts of all the systems that are trying to work together to bring education, but we need to root ourselves in this conversation around why these systems, especially of incarceration, exist. And it's rooted in anti-Black white supremacy, right? And if we are going into providing education just as thinking about recidivism and workplace development, we totally missed the opportunities around liberation that we really, hopefully, we're all invested in doing this work for. Even when we talk about intellectual pursuit, I've been in education for over 20 years. And I know when I hear those types of terms that we have to unpack that as well. What do we consider intellectual? What do we consider success? And so those are also rooted in this entire system that's working, that was built to work, for a purpose. It's an extension of slavery. And I laughed as we were doing an initial outline for I'm in Washington State, for our Department of Corrections. One of the questions was, how do you recruit people of color in underrepresented groups? And I want to be like, how's your, how are your numbers in success of recruiting people of color? So I'm putting it out there just because I've been here for the last several webinars, and I feel like we have to root really what these systems are. Our higher ed systems are rooted in it. Our carceral systems are rooted in it. And I think we have to get back to that as well, and unpack that in all the work we're doing.
Molly, thank you. And I'm gonna, I don't know, I think Mary Gould is on the line, but I'm also going to invite you to submit to the Journal of Higher Education in Prison, Volume 3, Call to Come Soon, that maybe expand on those thoughts a bit. Okay, so the last thing that we're doing today is really just kind of wrapping up some further guidance comments. And I'm going to kick it over to Stephanie here a little bit to walk us through, and then we can kind of open up the conversation. I will go back a slide, just it did come up. And so we do know that we're waiting for guidance on second chance Pell sites. There is some confusion as to whether or not sites can enroll new students after July 1. Would love some clarity if folks know. I
think we just saw in the chat the Vera folks chiming in, and that's exactly why we kept this slide in, is that we knew there would be some folks on the call who could answer this. As to whether, how second chance Pell sites are still enrolling students. It seems like it might be a 3-year process, but again, it doesn't seem like that guidance has come out yet, but it seems like from the Vera folks that it was, that it definitely will be continuing past July 1st. I don't know if anybody from Vera wants to chime in.
So would it be fair to say at this point, we do not have the answer to that question?
No, that's not quite it.
Okay.
We don't have the sub-regulatory guidance. We're really excited to see it. But if you're a second chance Pell college, keep going. Keep going, keep going. You don't have to become a PEP this July in order to be operating in the fall. So second chance Pell sites, just keep going. Keep going.
Excellent. You heard it here, folks. Keep going. I love this. Okay. So we went through accreditation, further guidance on debt and default. Stephanie, do you want to talk through any of these?
Sure. With these next two slides, I think we mainly wanted to just highlight two publications that we think people should know about. The first one is from the Student Borrower Protection Center submitted a joint public comment and attached a report that they had published earlier called Collection at All Costs, which is focused particularly on incarcerated borrowers. And they just had some really important recommendations for the Department of Ed on, instead of just waiting for incarcerated borrowers to learn about things like Fresh Start and debt relief, that there should be some active work to find people by cross-referencing different databases that the Department of Ed and others might have, making information more accessible for incarcerated borrowers. This is something we've talked about in these webinars as well, to make information directly available and tailored to incarcerated borrowers directly from the Department of Ed. Also having a toll-free number, just because as this whole report outlines, and I'll put it in the chat in just a minute, is that people don't have access to the 1-800 numbers that are often required to get have access to some of these programs. And just going through a couple of other things, the second to the bottom is canceling debt for people who have been incarcerated 5 or more years. And this was building on some previous practices of just being able to write off student debt for incarcerated people, which seems like that's something that the Department of Ed is already doing. So there's really no benefit in keeping people in debt if you're just going to be writing off that debt anyway. So why not cancel it, I think, is the argument of this report. So that's just, I'll put it in the chat in just a minute, but I think that's an important report for people to read. And we just wanted to use that opportunity to highlight it. And hopefully this is a topic that the Department of Ed promised some further guidance in the final regulations. So we're hoping that this report helps to inform some of that.
Thank you, Stephanie. The other thing we want to highlight on further guidance needed is dependency overrides. Stephanie, you want to chat about this?
Sure, I just brought this one up as well because it's a question that people have asked me a couple of times about what will happen now with issues like dependency overrides, and NASFA put together a really good brief about, which I'll also put in the chat, about working with incarcerated students. And part of it is just reminding institutions of their existing authorities. My impression is that incarcerated people are now included under that category of unusual circumstances, so that financial aid administrators can exercise their professional judgment to be able to work with those students.
Heidi, looks like financial aid from Adams State, maybe? Is that right?
Yes, yes, that is right. You can hear me?
Yes.
I was hoping, I'm sorry, I don't know who just presented these last two slides, but I'm the director of financial aid at Adams. We have a program, and there's some confusion about Fresh Start. I think that a lot of people don't realize that Fresh Start is going to end. Can I confirm that the last day of the default protections under Fresh Start is June 30th of 2023. And after that date, then we go back to the old regs of helping students through the process, which can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I'm asking these questions because timing is so crucial. It's just funny to me and confuses me. Why would the Department of Ed put that timeline on Fresh Start if it's just very, I'm very confused about what are we to tell students? How do we help them after June 30th when Fresh Start ends? I think there's a misconception that people think that Fresh Start is just forever, and it's not.
Well, I see Alan in the chat. Alan, can you drop some wisdom here? Would you mind coming off mute?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. And I just literally just joined the meeting. So it happens a year after the end of the payment pause. I don't have the language in front of me. It's like 60 days after the end of the payment pause and then a year after that. So it's really there's at least a year after June. Unless the Supreme Court makes their decision before June, then it would be a year after that. It's whichever happens earlier.
So is it fair to say though, then June 30th is not the end?
It's definitely not the end. It's a year after that, at least. I think it really comes down to about August of 2024.
Is there anything that you can guide me to that has that exact particular date? Because I have researched these regs for the past couple of days, and there is a lot of conflicting information out there about Fresh Start.
Yeah, just give me a second to Google it and I'll drop the link in.
Thank you. And Alan, I emailed you about it yesterday. So if you could just reply to that email with whatever, that will help me.
I got you.
It's super hard from the financial aid administrator's point of view to help. I want to be able to do one stop with our students, right? Like, I don't like this, going to the facility, helping them that, oh, there's more that we need, you need this acknowledgement or whatever. And I just feel like the information on the financial aid side, like, we just need to know exactly what do we do, like, until this date, and then after this date, the year after the June 23rd, then what do we do? It's just there's just a lot of conflicting information out there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, Alan.
Yes.
Rachel.
Hey guys, so I'm pretty new to all this conversation and all this vocabulary, and I feel like a lot of this is kind of over my head, but just getting back to super basics, I'm hearing a lot of what programs need to do to prepare, but what about just general students? I have letter after letter after letter saying, hey, I'm going to pay through this for Pell. I already have my FOSFA. I've gotten my letter. They said I've gotten this money. So students have very wrong information. So, them applying for FAFSA now and getting that information isn't accurate. I don't know what kind of eligibility students might have. Is a correspondence program going to work? Are they going to have to be in a live program? What kind of information should I be giving students so they're not misled into thinking all of my college is going to be paid for through Pell now?
Sure. Rachel, would you mind telling us where you're at or in what functional area you're in?
Yes, I'm also at Adams State University, and I work in the admissions portions of our prison correspondence education program.
Great. Yes, you've got Lauren over there. Well, and I would say you're in a semi-unique situation too, because you have correspondence and in person, right? Like, you're kind of dealing with, I don't have a great answer, but I would direct you to our first webinar where we talked a lot about student financial aid, literacy, and autonomy. I don't know if other folks want to chime in here. I have one more slide and then we can just go at it. Further guidance priority. So I don't have a ton to say on this. I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie here to explain what these are. And then if folks have certainly comments to chime in.
Yeah, I think the point here was that in some significant public comments, there was hope for more guidance from the Department of Ed about protecting students' satisfactory academic progress, which is very closely tied to this return of Title IV funds. We talked about this a little bit last time, and how whether or not they should be doing that, there are some institutions kind of passing that cost along to students if they are subject to a transfer, disciplinary or otherwise. And so there were actually a couple of suggestions from you all during our webinars about examples where there was either an agreement with corrections that if someone was transferred, then that amount would be charged to the Department of Corrections. But then someone also brought up last time exceptions that were made during COVID, and whether those could be adapted and continued for incarcerated students. So would love to hear more feedback from you all on that guidance as well, because we're hoping that, again, the title of this webinar is Informing Public Guidance Through Dialogue. So we're hoping that you all have thoughts about what you would like to see from the Department of Ed.
I think I'm gonna stop screen share. I will just also say that if folks are willing to share their state application or their oversight entity application, I think this would be another, not to make more work for you, Ved, but I think this would be another kind of document portal where we could really be sharing some insight and resources here. Has that already started? Am I proposing something that already exists?
That to a degree, yes, we're working on something that something like that would live within. I want to leak too much information yet, but yeah, we're working on something like that. Yeah,
I think that would be really helpful, so that we can also just see what's going on. But I'd love to open it up. What are folks thinking? Feedback? Anything?
I'll just jump in and say, again, we need help now. And, I think that getting DOCs together, even to hear from each other what's being developed. I mean, again, we're our own, everyone's their own, but I think that that'd be really helpful. And or hearing from Ed, what's going to be expected of these oversight entities would be very helpful. I think the more though that we can share resources, the sooner the better. So again, my plug for more communication and places to share information sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Rachel. We all just need like a recording of that so that we can just play it in all the different spaces that we're in. Yes, Molly.
All right, I don't like the way you said yes, Molly. Like I was gonna waste everybody's time with my question.
I was trying to read and talk at the same time. My bad.
Well, I honestly, I kind of wanted to double down on the question I asked earlier, just that now that we've had another hour's worth of conversation about it. And because I think I agree with you. I think the notion of sharing out resources, what already exists, who's developed something, how are we thinking about this? All of that seems like it's in the, I'm gonna put my hand down. All of that seems like it's in the best interest of sort of field building and knowledge building here. And so again, just would ask, for those of us representing the philanthropic community who are thinking about how to support this field in a macro sense, as we all move towards whatever this next year and then couple of years is going to look like, it would be really helpful to hear from folks. What sort of support, what sort of technical assistance could we use more of, less of, something that doesn't exist at all yet? Any of that kind of feedback or thoughts that folks have either in this moment on the call, or if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to chat at any point, because I think, again, from my perspective, as I think about our role as a funder here, the best thing we can do is try to seed opportunities for people to be able to talk to each other and share resources. And, when we talk to folks across the field about what they need, almost always they say, I need to know what other people are doing. So just curious if folks have any sort of parting thoughts about the kind of support that would be useful, or a plug for, yes, it would be great to see applications from other states, like whatever those things are, please feel free to drop them in the chat or say them out loud if they're, if God is putting it on your heart to do that right now. That would be great. Thanks.
Well, and I just want to piggyback on that too. I mean, I know Vera's helping in this area too. So Vera, if you've got something that you think is particularly strong in terms of a template or guidance that you're giving, I think that would be super helpful to know as well. Ved, did you have your hand up?
So I was gonna raise that we have something called a document library on our website that we're looking to like expand and grow, where it shares different things like staff handbooks, MOUs, contracts, things like this that people use in their own states. And we're looking to grow that. It's kind of crowdsourced information. I guess what I said I wasn't going to leak. I guess I'll kind of say what we're kind of working on in this space, since it seems to be like a real topic, and it's in its embryonic phase, but we're trying to build out a sort of like an interactive, like HEP Reddit sort of platform. Obviously, we don't want it to be like unruly, and we expect, you know, community guidelines and all these sorts of things and whatnot, but like having a place where people can have sub topics, sub conversations, exchange resources based on their region, based on their interest, things like this. And so exchange resources, have open dialogue, open conversations and things like this, fully interactive. So we're working with some web designers right now to kind of build out a platform where people can interact in real time and share resources based on region, states, you know, like I said, interest and things like this. So
Then will there be an opportunity for people to get together and do some of this work together at, like, say, potentially like a conference later in the year?
Yes, absolutely. And I can definitely plug, I mean, I plug our conference again. We're going to go live with some messaging here in the next week, and then it'll ramp that up in March, but the national conference is happening in Atlanta, November 9th through 11th. And there will be all sorts of workshops and opportunities to exchange resources and have open dialogue. We'll have, you know, lots of information coming out around that. So, but we also anticipate leading up to that, having some planning sessions, which will be public and open to the community as well, to have input on the format and layout of the conference as well. So it's not just something like we're doing, but we'll have some open conversations and invitations from the community to join and helping us plan this as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ved. Anybody want to take up Molly and her question about what we all need?
Cool, you're good? Everybody's great? Great.
I mean, I could use some more money from the philanthropic community. I'll say it. Other comments?
I would say we need more passionate people in this field of work. We need less policing in trying to rehabilitate and help men and women get back on track. We can't worry about monitoring them and watching them and policing them. And in that environment, no one learns. Like you said, if you have an officer in the classroom, nobody's really going to learn. They're going to be more concerned with putting on a front for the officer or staying within line for the officer. My classes never have officers in them, and my classes are so robust that people enjoy themselves. Some of this, these are the first opportunities for some men to get educated, to ever be engaged in the education system. So I don't understand why would, we police too much in America. That's our problem. We're doing too much policing. We need to do more educating, do more preventative stuff, and we won't have to work on reentry. And you get where I'm coming from? That's our problem in America. We police and lock people up too much. So I think we need more passionate people in this field. Stop hiring police officers to be teachers. That's what I say.
Thank you, Brian. And I will just say, I think at least it's been in my experience that for facilities where officers are in the classroom, it's typically not at the request from the higher ed program. It's typically at the insistence from the facility. And so I think another kind of resource that'd be super helpful is if you are a program that has negotiated with corrections not to have officers in the classroom. I think there are folks on this call who would also love what those talking points are. What's the justification? What's the rationale? Share it wide, so that the rest of us can learn from that. Ben.
So before I say this, I would represent that Vera has a model for what I'm about to say, but absent that model, I think one of the pieces that is really hard from a correctional standpoint is when you have multiple college partners and you're expecting in a state, for instance, and you expect them to share resources for maybe peripheral services, financial aid advising, those types of things. From my experience, the colleges are not designed to share that way. And that's hard to try to facilitate that, because the expectations that corrections have of college partners is to provide a lot of really heavy lifts as it relates to financial aid, career advising, academic advising, to peripheral services. And in my worldview, there's got to be a way for them to share resources towards that end. And again, Vera has a model that we're exploring, but outside of that model, how a resource to help facilitate that dialogue would be helpful.
Well, and I'll just connect this back to Molly. I think maybe somebody tried to answer your question, or did, not try, Ben, did. But this might be an area where additional technical assistance would be helpful. I'd be curious to hear how Vera, how folks at Vera think that's going. I will say that we're running into challenges. There are some services that we can collaborate on, right? There are some services because of FERPA that we cannot, and I am definitely not the person to kind of yell FERPA and not do anything. I understand the law, but when we are, thinking about which services can we cross-train folks to serve multiple institutions, things like college access, things like FAFSA, things that everybody can, but when we get into the nitty-gritty about academic advising and things like that, that might really need to be negotiated at a state level if we're going to kind of do the work well and not duplicate services. Rebecca, do you want to come off mute really quick and give this a plug?
Yes, happy to. Open Campus, I know Charlotte was mentioned earlier, is also hosting an event next week. I just dropped it in the chat. Definitely welcome folks to come. And I do think one of the takeaways from that event will be student-facing information about what is Pell. Some of the things I think, Erin, Stephanie, I know you all have some student-facing materials, but I think that's also one of the goals that Charlotte has for the event and conversation next week.
Thank you. I'll also just say, certainly reach out to Ved, reach out to Stephanie, reach out to myself, reach out to the folks at Vera. If there are other webinars that you think, other conversations, I think one of the biggest things to come out of this series of webinars is this conversation, the conversations that we're having with each other. So if there are other topics that you all are interested in, Stephanie and I don't have to be the people who facilitate. We can just help make it happen. Of course, with Ved's blessing. But I think I would love to be supportive in any way to kind of keep these things going. Ved, Stephanie, any final words of optimism before we get out of here?
Go ahead, Ved.
I was just going to say, I think we can do many things at once. And so focusing on one thing at one time doesn't mean we can't focus on a lot of other things as well that were brought up in this call. So it's not, so I think, I'll always say it's a both and I think we can focus on a lot of the social issues and systemic issues around this work while also looking at some of the technical things in the here and now as well. And they can happen hand in hand. So
yeah. I was going to say something similar, actually, just that I think that conversation earlier about anti-Blackness is very important and does need to be centered in this conversation. And just that I think, as Molly, who made the comment, brought up, this is a question for both corrections and for colleges. These are legacies that the institutions, for those of us who are in higher ed, our institutions have these legacies too, and that's something that we can't ignore. So just wanted to say that point.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, folks. Daniel, thanks again for joining. Please do we're going to make all this publicly available. So if you've got questions that didn't get answered, put them in the chat because we'll have the transcript as well. So.
Well, thanks for having me. It was nice to meet a lot of you, Boo. Good to see some friendly faces.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.